Welcome back to another episode of The Right Stuff. I'm your host, Jake McAtee. I'm here with my co-host, Jared Longshore.
Yes.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
We have today a very special guest, author, director of the MFA at New St. Andrews, Christine Cohen.
Hello.
Did I nail that?
Glad
This
to
is
be
the
here.
director
Yes.
of the MFA.
That's it.
Excellent.
Director.
Excellent. I'm glad you're here. We have several books of yours, so there's like
Yep.
places we could go there. But I also wanted to talk to you about the MFA. I think I had you on a different thing at Canon to talk about your time in the MFA.
Yes.
You were a student,
I was the first graduating student.
but
at
you're
Camperdown
the
MFA.
director now.
Yes.
What is that?
Plot
What
twist.
do you, I mean, like, so clearly you like it. What do you
Yeah.
love about the MFA? What is an
Yes.
MFA maybe?
Well, this is in particular, it's a Master of Fine Arts degree in creative writing.
Okay.
So this program is specifically geared toward creative writing. We are looking at short stories, novels, some forays into screenwriting, and the occasional poetry as well. Your favorite.
Yes.
But what I really love about the program is we were really intentional in setting up the program so that the trajectory of it is really specific to give students the best chance of success at each level of writing. So going from the very beginning, when they start year one, we're looking at what is the seed, the idea, the premise, the what if of the story,
Yep.
right? So we're starting at the very beginning. We're working with them on that because you can have an idea for a story and you can take it any number of directions, most of which are bad.
Yes.
And so you in particular, are helping the students
Sure.
figure out how to really hone that idea into the best possible version of the story.
Okay.
So from there, we're teasing out the characters, the world, the magic system, the plot. But we're doing it kind of step by step, brick by brick. And then they write the novel. They also learn how to edit the novel. And then at the end, we're also teaching them about how to find an agent, how to find a publisher, how to write a good query letter.
So every student finishes with a completed
Manuscript, yes.
Okay.
The goal is a completed manuscript that they then will do one round of edits on that gets a final look over by their instructor before they go. Because our goal is not just to churn out MFA degrees. We're not interested in just helping people learn how to write better.
English professors is what you want.
Yeah.
Is that?
No, that's
Okay.
not what we're looking for.
Okay, sorry.
We love the English professors, but
Yeah.
we are looking for a great writer who is going to actually go and get their work out into the world. Because you can be a great writer, but if you don't do anything with your work, it's wasted talent. And we want to see these writers go out and change the literary landscape. It's in need of change. And so our goal is to help people not just learn how to write better, but also how to be aggressive in seeking out publishers, agents, book deals, that sort of thing.
So I have a question about this. You have an idea, and it can go a lot of bad directions, you say.
Yeah.
But Jake is involved in helping the idea take it to have the story take its best form. Is
Sure.
that basically what you said?
Yes.
Can you just like sketch out what that would look like? So for people that don't know anything about the MFA and they don't know much about writing, you're saying I show up with an idea day one, and your warning is as you start to try to turn this into a story, a narrative, a plot, there's a lot of bad places you can go. How do you all help me not to go to the bad places? How do you help me to make it the best story possible?
Christine.
You want me to start?
Sure.
I'll start and then you can jump in with
Okay.
your expertise. So a lot of times, I think what we have found is that if someone can't articulate their idea within a few sentences, then they don't actually know what their idea is, or it isn't very good. So if someone says, yeah, I have an idea for a story, and they're kind of throwing around some ideas or concepts, but we're sort of looking at them like, but what that doesn't really make sense, and then you ask them some clarification questions and they say, oh, well, I haven't really thought about that, or I haven't really thought about that aspect. There's just the ability to clearly condense your story into a pitch. It's a skill in and of itself, and it's hard to do. But the better you are at doing that before you even begin writing, the more clarity that brings to the project itself. So that each time you come to a decision point in the writing process, you can say, okay, well, what's the heart of my story? What's it really about? This thing that I've condensed it down into, and which way that I go will best illuminate and explain that idea.
Now, this idea. So if you're asking for me for an idea, do I have to have a plot, or
No.
What constitutes an idea?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I would say, so first off, number one, what happens here with like the good and bad idea real quick is oftentimes, number one, writing is very hard.
Yes.
Fiction is very hard. And then two, like what I've seen sometimes is that people that are who are very affected by good literature or storytelling, like, wow, I love the way that made me feel, or, like good stuff has gotten to them and they're like, I want to do that. But they've yet to think, how did that happen? Like, what was the mechanism? What are they doing to get me to that, to make me feel that way? A lot of times they're just sort of gesturing off of that, or, I want to do something that's epic. I want to write an epic, and you're like, okay, tell me more about that. Like, what is the epic? And they're like, well, it's complicated because, so
I want to write a story that explores racism in the South. And you're like, but that's not a story. That's a theme.
It's a theme, so there's, I think, oftentimes like students will come in with that sort of like, like finding out like, what is required to get a story like going. Because what'll happen is if they're just going off a vibe or a theme, they'll find out like as they start writing, it's like, wow, I'm really struggling hard. And the reality is because they didn't have there was no engine. They didn't actually turn the key over. They were just sort of like vibing.
Is it because they didn't have an idea, or is it because they didn't have a plot, or they didn't have either?
So the particular class that I have at New St. Andrews is going over like essentially is what they would call a log line. In nonfiction, it's a thesis. So in nonfiction, it's like, here's what I'm arguing, and you're positioning yourself against other people, such that like, okay, I have a take that contra those people. That would be the nonfiction version. The fiction version would just be like in the most clinical way of saying it is character desires a thing and stakes, or else, and if he doesn't get it, or else. So like that would be a way to pitch something like, here's a character who wants this thing and the stakes are this.
This is what's standing in their way.
Standing in the way, and if they don't get it, they'll die.
Yeah.
Whatever. Like log lines are all over the place too, though, so it's not required that it fills that out, but I always say like it's got to at least fill that out. So man, now I forget the animated Robot. The robot animated movie from like the 90s.
Iron Giant.
Iron Giant. Did you ever see Iron Giant?
Mm-mm.
It was pitched as, what if a gun had a soul? Just like, ooh, all right, I'll listen to that. You know what I mean? Like, tell me more about that. It basically, the pitch just has to be like enough for the other person across the table to be like,
to have some interest. And I think
I
think actually this is kind of like two separate things. Like on the one hand, you have the pitch where you're talking character stakes, motivation. On the other side, you have more of the quick pitch, what if concept. And that's where you get, what if a gun had a soul?
Sure.
What if there was a theme park for dinosaurs? That's how we get Jurassic Park. But that's a great concept because there's irony in there, right? The theme park, but with dinosaurs. And so that's something, though, that immediately gets people's attention. And so what happens, and this especially happens to people raised on Tolkien and Lewis, is they're like, well, I'm going to write a story that's like a character who really wants to get this one prized necklace back from, or take this necklace and throw it into the pond that will destroy the necklace that's taken over the world. And, like they're doing something derivative that's also very vague and confusing. And so, as they're talking, we're thinking to ourselves that there's nothing new about this, right? You're looking for something that's unique, that's fresh, that's exciting, but then also has the clear-cut stakes and characters. So it's a lot of different parts that we're sort of asking them to compile, but we're helping them. This is what we're doing, is they're giving us things, we're helping them tweak it, we're shooting down bad ideas. It's a kiln, after all. So they're used to, by year 2 at least, they're used to this sort of refining process that we're putting them through.
So what if A Gun Had a Soul is an idea, is a sufficient idea? It's nowhere near a plot, but it's something.
No,
it's a hook
right.
that you're
Yes.
saying that would constitute an idea.
Yeah.
That would pass my class.
Ooh, it's a good term.
Can you give me an idea for the movie The Sandlot?
Yeah, that's a good question. Sandlot. What is the log
I have
line
never
for
seen The Sandlot.
Oh, whoa.
Sorry.
Whoa.
Wow.
So it's all on you, Jake.
What is the hook of Sandlot? Dang. I'll think about it.
Yeah, I was trying to think. I was thinking of the potency of hooks. I mean, there's obviously hooks. Field of Dreams. Like, what if a guy built a?
Yeah, there you go.
What if a guy built a field
Right.
for like great heroes of the past to play?
And not every.
That materializes far more quickly than Sandlot. But
Yeah.
something like Sandlot is great Americana, great. I mean, just a fantastic film. But the hook doesn't materialize as quickly when I think about the story or the plot of the film.
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah.
interesting. It makes me wonder. Can you have how
Yeah.
important is this hook?
Yeah, it's interesting. It is interesting because you think too about like stories around like the Henry Huggins level of things, and you're like, okay, there's not necessarily total hooks there for that kind of book that would we still do that? We would still publish something like that, or we would track along with. But yeah, I think for The Sandlot, which is basically, I mean, you get a big Great. What is it? It's not a Great Dane, but you get a big Mastiff. You know, there's stakes. There's.
I don't know. I'm no help in this one. I do think though that sometimes the pitch that you'll see will be something like, over the course of an evening, the lives of 4 characters are, take separate high school friends, take separate directions at the cost of their friendship or something. Like, you can have something more like that where it's sort of an explanation of, like you were even saying with Americana, like an explanation of an event or like what's going to happen. So you can get something like that. Even
You talk about like that, like one of my big parts of my class is like subtext, which is just like what makes this scene like money. When I think about The Sandlot, one of like the iconic scenes that stand out is that I think gets it like closer to the hook of the movie is where they're playing catch outside, of the ball lands to him and he ends up just running the ball all the way back to him and handing it over, like totally fails on like what catch is. So just bringing a kid in that has no clue, like a total alien, to like a very thing we all know and is very common. And then just like he has to like grow into a total like neighborhood kid ready to go at any time. Like,
Yeah, I think you just hit it though. So the hook is what if a dork in a new town loses his dad's Babe Ruth signed ball?
there it is. Yes,
And
dude, you nailed it.
There it
That's
is, right?
No,
and
that's
finds
it. That is
friends. Finds friends.
He loses a ball and he thinks
Through
it's a totally
failure.
common ball. Turns
Yeah.
out it was signed by Babe Ruth,
Yeah.
who all of the kids
Baby Ruthie?
and like no, it's very Pratchett almost, of like bringing like a situation of like things that are very common, but you put them in a different world and they're learning all of it. I don't know. It's very situational. That kind of thing. It's electric. It's great.
sometimes for me, my what if is actually more of a challenge to myself. So like with The Winter King, I thought, what if I rewrote Till We Have Faces type of character conversion in a Nordic setting. And then with The Sinking City, I had read Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke, and I loved it. It's this 500-page tome, and I thought, what if I wrote that for teens? So I like to, and that can actually be really helpful in the publishing world in particular when you do what's called the X meets Y, where you say like, okay, it's this but for kids. It's this type of concept or this feel or this world meets these stakes. So sometimes you can tag it that way.
So like that would be, yeah, we talk about like the cocktail taster sort of like, in my first year of teaching, there was someone that really wanted to chase, let's see if I can remember it. Mad Max Fury Road meets, like Christian, it's the allegory, it's the John Bunyan's allegory, not Bunyan's,
Pilgrim's Progress.
Pilgrim's Progress. So he wanted to do Mad Max Fury Road meets Pilgrim's Progress. And it was just like, dude, I'm hooked. Like whatever, like you need to figure that out. That particular student like didn't deliver on that, so that's still free for anybody who wants it. But yeah, that's a very like, especially when you're talking to someone at a publisher and you're like, here's what I'm chasing. And if you have something that's like fresh and interesting, like in my class, I tell them all the time, which may not be what Christine wants, but it's just like, you could change your life on something like that. Somebody could just fork over cash and be like, yeah, chase that. Which to your point about like, do they need a plot? Like for my class, I'm just telling them like, if you can just have that you're chasing, that'll help you get through a lot of plot problems. Like,
so you're saying the hook is first, and the hook is important, or what we're calling the idea.
Yes. Yeah. Like if you have that being like, why am I here in this book? Like, why am I writing this?
Yeah. I'm sure you know this lore, but there's the story of the investors meeting where they were pitching Alien.
Okay, no.
And they said it's Jaws in space.
There you go. Yeah, there you go.
And they were given a lot of money to make Alien.
That's it. I mean, it's like if you can just be somebody that's like, that's the freshness, because as Christine knows, like plots are like not.
Plots are
unique.
the most malleable thing in the world.
They're not unique, and it's just like you basically like I can just
those.
swap out Toy Story and put it in like the right different people, and you have your plot. It's all there. You're ready to go.
What
it's
was
like
the one
that.
we were talking about? This one with ants.
Oh, that is
it's Magnificent Seven.
That Magnificent Seven. But is it A Bug's World or is it
A Bug's Life? That's what
A Bug's Life.
It's Bug's Life and
the original Magnificent Seven, not the Denzel one, but
Yeah.
the
original one.
A Bug's Life.
It's the exact same plot.
Walk me through it.
I haven't seen A Bug's Life forever, but like Magnificent. Well, so yeah, I won't be able to do that. But
Locusts.
The locusts are coming
nice.
to. You know, they require a certain amount of like an offering or a certain amount of food from the poor townspeople, the bugs, the ants, who then have to. They can't come up with it, right? I think the main character loses it all.
Right.
And so then they hire the outsiders
to help them
help them
combat
and fight the locusts.
Which is like the very original Magnificent
Seven.
is like the guys are hired by a little like Mexican town.
Yeah.
Who, you know, the big baddies come in and take all the crop, all of their work, and move on. And they were like, we'd like to hire out some guns to help push them off. So anyway, you know, plots do that. So like oftentimes, like in my class, like I'm really not interested in how they're going to execute. I just want them thinking in terms of like, okay, that's that twist right there is nice, and I want to chase that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now that I know what constitutes an idea, a pitch, what makes it good? Like, what's so good about the Babe Ruth ball or Mad Max meets Bunyan?
Yeah, Christine.
What makes it sizzle? Which I'm sure is a hard question, because I think we kind of know when it does and we know when it doesn't.
No, that's part of
why
this
is hard. Eternally the question that I think every creative is asking is like, what is and sometimes I think it's a surprise to people, you know, something will be the surprise box office hit where it's like, oh, we didn't realize that was going to be the thing that really struck a chord with the American people. But I think that there can be a lot of reasons. You can have irony, again, is one of those things. So if you have a character, a fish out of water, you know, a character in a situation that they have no experience in, we just love those stories naturally. We love it when somebody ends up in a place and has to use their skills to survive or succeed. We love post-apocalyptic stories. Like everyone has that feeling of like, what would I do if the world was ending, you know? So I think a lot of it is just appealing to really basic human emotions and desires and things that we find intriguing and fascinating. We love the underdog stories. There's just like certain tropes and types that God has built into the world that we enjoy watching over and over and over again.
Yeah. And then however much taste works into it, it's just that thing where like the more you traffic in subtext, the more you, which is basically metaphor, which is irony. It's just that thing. The more you're into it, the more you're like a Wodehouse guy who is like trafficking in like it's poetry. It's just this thing, like this thing. And then that tension is like whatever's happening in between those two things is the money. And the more it's really hard to.
Sometimes it comes down to trends, so unfortunately, well, since I'm in the YA world, we have.
Are you talking about what makes what delivers on like that moment between those two things of the idea, or like what on execution makes a good thing? Or
I was asking really what makes an idea sizzle. Like somebody pitches you an idea and it sizzles, and somebody pitches you an idea and it's okay. And some kind of what are the elements that make it what it is. But I mean, maybe to now that you brought up Wodehouse, I have more questions. So what do you do with a guy like Wodehouse? My bet is if Wodehouse sits down and gives you the pitch for any of his Jeeves and Wooster plots, any of his Jeeves and Wooster ideas, I don't think they sizzle. I don't think his idea is going to sizzle. Like, oh, so I go to Aunt Agatha's house and some rich lady loses a necklace and Jeeves finds it. And you'd be like okay.
Yeah.
Well,
but is Wodehouse just amazing because of his pacing, because of his metaphors, because of the humor? Is that is it not an idea sizzle thing?
You go ahead.
I think so. I think what we're talking about
far
here.
Fewer Wodehouse than you have, so you go for it.
Well, I think that what we're talking about here is kind of the difference between commercial fiction and maybe like
that's true
upmarket or literary fiction.
Yeah.
So when we're talking like high concept, big pitches, that's all the very commercial fiction, which is what I write. It's the stuff that you can really nail down kind of on a what if level. When you get over into the literary world, which calling Wodehouse literary fiction makes it sound like he's more pretentious than he is. I'd call him maybe like upmarket, right? Like he's kind of straddling that line between he's someone that the masses enjoy, but he also is very clever and his characters are very clever. And so there's a level of sort of that literary fiction element to him. And once you get over into literary fiction, pitches become a very weird thing. They are much less easy to sort of boil down. And I think a lot of times what they're judged on is more the merit of the writing itself.
Well, that's okay. That's fascinating. So
I think it delivers on the same things too, though. I mean, less on the
does.
idea, less maybe on the idea, but what makes Wodehouse good is he's trafficking in the same exact thing where it is execution on the line, but what he's doing on the line is like the metaphor, like the lightheartedness, like threading the needles that he does.
Right. And the situational humor of it.
That I think is
I
almost
think
very Sandlot on that level, same level of hook, where it may not be a huge like box office thing, but you are getting like tons of that situational alien comes to this world kind of subtext.
Right.
Commercial fiction and literary fiction. You're using those. And commercial would just be kind of mass market, and literary is just more intelligent. Is that how you would define these two?
I write commercials, so I like to think it's very intelligent. But generally, literary fiction is just more character driven than plot driven. So usually with literary, you're not seeing like an exoskeleton of a plot in the way that you are with character. Literary fiction is the stuff that goes through the award circuits. Commercial fiction is the stuff you find in airport bookstores selling, in mass.
Okay.
So usually, and there is a lot of crossover, and especially now, there's actually a lot of people who are working in the crossover field. But with a lot of times when you get genre fiction, right? Thrillers, westerns, whatever, those are in the commercial world, as opposed to literary fiction, which it does generally, if you're going to find, again, the snobs, they're over in the literary world. Okay. But there's good people there too.
But you did start out by saying you have this pitch or this idea, and you kind of indicated that Jake it could go bad. It could go a lot of wrong ways. And Jake's there to make sure it turns into the best story possible. So now down the line, now that I know what a good pitch is, good idea, how do you make sure it doesn't go south? You said you don't care a lot about plot.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, like, okay, so where do the students go wrong if they do have a great hook?
Yeah. So they've passed mine. Like they're gonna. There's plenty of places to fail. I mean, they could go wrong, and like we've seen like students that bring us to the end, and we're like, whoa, that was like the worst call of all time. You know, like they thought, oh, this is a very inverse heroic moment, or all of a sudden you're just like, oh, this killed the story. Like,
and
this
to be
was a
honest,
poor
usually
call.
by the time they bring it to us, they also know.
Yeah.
They're like, this failed. And I don't actually like to think of it as a failure, because you have to, especially for the students who this is their first time writing a novel from start to finish, it will be a quote unquote failure in terms of like, it's not going to be the thing that gets published. So I try to remind the students of that all the way through this process, that it is a weird thing, but you have to be willing to pour your heart and soul into writing this story that probably is not going to see the light of day. And that's because you don't know what doesn't work a lot of times until you've written it. And you often will get to the end and be like, okay, that was a cool concept, but I don't have the writing chops to deliver on this yet. So I'm going to shelve that and come back to it in a decade when I'm a better writer and I can do that concept justice, because I really love it. So no story is ever like an entirely, I never like to think that any story has to be completely thrown out. It's just that a lot of times what they're doing here is like building their very first chair. And we're not going to be like, go pitch that to Pottery Barn, see if they want to buy it, like, but you have to build it so that what does and doesn't work for the next time around. So there are just all kinds of, and the funny thing is, first drafts are always awful. And so you do just fail. I'm in the middle of a first draft and I can already see the ways I'm failing just monumentally, but I can't actually focus on that yet. I have to get to the end. And then I can start picking apart all the things and fixing what needs to be fixed. So, I don't know. It can sometimes I think what happens is a student will start writing, they'll get skittish and they'll try to pivot. It'll be like, this isn't working. So I actually am changing direction. And their thesis advisor is trying to ride this tandem bicycle with them. And they're like, wait, no, where are we going? Come back. We had a plan. This was the way we were going and we've gotten off track. So, it is funny how many ways you can spectacularly fail writing that first draft. But it is pretty much a guarantee that the first draft will be a mess. It's just a question of, is it a mess that's worth revising or not?
So you just don't have the writing chops. That's one. And bad endings. It's another.
Character calls, character moments.
Yep. That can be a pretty big one. If as they start writing, we realize you don't know who these characters are. And so they're not making sense. They're not doing things in any sort of logical or coherent way. And that, again, that's tricky because there's so much about writing that also you have to understand human nature very well. You have to see the world clearly. It's a high calling because you're making all sorts of judgment calls about the world, characters, people, consequences, and you're trying to influence people's loyalties in the right direction, but you can accidentally influence them the wrong way. I've had that where I've read a manuscript by a student and I've said, so you realize that you just condoned murder. They're like, oh, well, I was sort of, but the character had this reason that they could do that, and they're trying to sort of flub it, but it's like, but they still murdered, and they can't get away with that. So it's interesting.
Yeah, I'm thinking of like when you mentioned endings, I thought of River Thief. I just remember.
How many different ways you could slice? You could have sliced that, or like chickened out on that.
You could have chickened out on that. You could have chickened out on that, or just like never thought of it. And I knowing enough about kind of our worldview here and things we hold, but that is when you talk. Okay, so you have stories that map. We mentioned this painting over here comes from
Wyeth's,
Yep.
or it's Treasure Island. Yeah.
And so as a side note, I would toss in, I think all artists of any kinds, and this could be from preachers to musicians to, they feel like they can't map something. So in everything you all have been saying has been talking about mapping. Like you take this and you stick it over here in this other place. But then you do have like I'm sure Nate's would say he wasn't, it wasn't a moment of divine inspiration. Like he is not the first one to ever create the structure of that
Correct.
ending.
Yeah.
But it is rare. Like, okay,
Yeah.
so you don't, that one gets you like in the gut and you're like, oh no, he didn't. Like, oh, he did. Oh, it's so good. It's just like, yes.
Shooting people. Yep.
Dude,
Yeah,
I mean, like,
just killing it.
I mean, wow. You know what I mean? Like that's and so kind of covenant curses and the things, so the worldview that was informing that plot, that ending is
That choice.
Yes. Which is really striking. I can tell like that's tough because a part of you just writing a good story is going to actually just be, it's a hugely theological endeavor.
Yeah.
Understanding human nature.
Yep.
That kind of thing.
And it's going to be the case anywhere. I mean, like, I assume this is something Greyfriars would see, or like any other like creative medium, whether it be for the pastoral world or for fine art, or creative fine arts, or whatever, where there are people who, like, sometimes we have people that come through the program that you're like, these are the kind of people that love to like world build in a coffee shop, listening to tunes all day, or, who could write just like stacks and stacks and stacks of things, but there's no like, it's not going yet. Like they think they just like writing, or, so it's like they're just big fans of a thing that, of something that they think this is what the writing is. And then all of a sudden you have a logline conversation and they're like stumped forever.
Tell me more about this. These people, what do they have that is unique? And then what don't they have?
I feel like,
okay, I think I know what you're talking about. Are you saying the people who could like,
they love like lo-fi beats. They want to go to coffee shops.
Lo-fi beats.
They go to coffee shops and they just are writing.
They can create a magic system Bible.
What they would think is like, yeah, I'm world building, or I'm just like writing. But what they're writing is like they're not like getting the engine going on an actual narrative.
Well, I think that maybe what it is because they don't understand characters.
Yeah,
and characters.
Like, yeah, it's the thing where like the minute I feel like it happens in my class, where then we start talking about like, what is your story going to like run on though? Where it's like, that's like a big.
Well, tell me about world, because, well, first of all, the reason I think this is interesting is my assumption is that the people that you're talking about are actually a pretty small subset of the population. I don't think a lot of people are sitting around like world building. I know I don't.
Correct.
And that's because
I mean, build often.
I don't world build.
I think it's big. Well,
I write articles. You know what I mean? Like that's. So tell me more about what is world building. What are they doing? And I'm just interested in that. What does that mean?
I can give an example here. Maybe is well, I have to use a hypothetical example. If I were to ask a student, can you tell me who your main character is and what they want, and what's their main, fatal flaw, and they come back to me with, well, my main character is and they give me some crazy name, which is a type of soldier in this army that I've created, these are the magic wielders in this world, and they actually ride the dragons who were forged originally in the mountains that are over here, and then they're like spreading a map out, and I'm like, wait, can bring me back to that character though, so what's their fatal flaw? Oh, well, you see, they have these swords, and they're really, it's this like,
these people are creepy.
No, it's
these people these people exist. Yeah. Who are these people? Is it very? I mean, I guess they talk about Tolkien does a lot of like.
Well, that's the thing is, I think these are not. This isn't creepy. This is people who love Tolkien and love the big world building, and that's what they're looking to recreate. But what they don't recognize is that Tolkien was starting with a hobbit in the ground, in a hole in the ground, like that he actually started with a character that he loved. And that that's what you're looking for as the heart of the story, is the character. All the world building is superfluous. It's super cool. It can be super cool.
But we're here for Sam Gamgee.
But we are here for the characters. And that's what drives the story. That's what we're here for, is the character. And so I think that's where a lot of times this breaks down, is people will be so excited about, like, let me show you this really cool world I've created. But I haven't actually stopped to think about who populates that world, and what we are much more interested in is human nature. Like that's what we're there for.
You say it's just like a
stories.
misunderstanding. Like they were affected by whether it's like something great or something bad.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I loved this about that. And so, but like a flaw, it's a fundamental flaw of understanding. However, whatever affected you, you don't actually get what they did. You think it was like spend a lot of time building.
You thought
it wasn't just the Misty Mountains.
You thought it was the three Elvish dialects.
Yes.
But it wasn't that. It was the who's around Frodo, who's helping him, who's not tempted by the ring, who is tempted. Those are the things that actually
Which I would guess
matter.
like there's versions of whatever that flaw is like in a Bible college. Or like there's a version of that flaw
Yeah.
in a
Yeah, you can start chasing down like intricacy of the Assyrian Empire.
Yeah, where
when
you're
you're
just
trying
like,
to when you're trying to preach.
We've missed it a little bit.
Yeah.
It's like it's not that those things are bad.
You just get back to Sennacherib, like, but you're like chasing down what size of shields.
Yeah,
I could see that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but that is a weird. That would be a weird error. At least like I'm thinking about. That's not the thing I would fall into if I were trying to write.
No,
but you want to juice those characters. Like the story has to be interesting,
right? And that's, I think, it's what you need both, because I think maybe the ditch on the other side is just a very generic world, like small town that doesn't have anything that lends itself to interest when you're reading it, where it's like, oh, or even just the derivative Tolkien thing where it's like there are elves and dwarves and small hairy-footed creatures, and where it's like, wait, but this has been done before. They're not doing anything unique or interesting in their world building. So you can get the other side too. There's just so many ways to fail.
All right, that's why you got to
Join
enroll in the
Camperdown
MFA.
MFA.
That's why you got to enroll in the MFA.
There we go. Yeah.
Let's see. Any last questions? Christine, you're writing currently. You said you're writing something very badly right now.
Yes. I am.
Can you tell us anything about it?
So
you don't have to. You can say no.
No, I actually will say no.
Good.
I'm going to keep it when I'm in first draft mode. I tend to keep it pretty close to the chest.
You don't actually want to go through maybe some of the script problems with us right now.
Yes.
Okay.
I can see them looming, but I don't actually want to talk about them with anyone else yet.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
Christine, what do you teach? You force the conversation to what I teach.
Yes.
Unfairly because I'm interviewing you.
Yeah.
But what do you do at the MFA?
Okay, so I teach in the first year. I teach short stories, and I teach the beginning of a 2-year class on writing the novel. So that's actually when we were talking about coming up with the initial concept, the characters, the world, that sort of thing. That's all year 1.
Okay.
It's the story architecture class. Then year 2 is novel disciplines, and that's much more scene level, paragraph level, line level craft. So we're looking at how to write a really good sentence, and how to vary your sentence length, and how to, and it's actually, it is funny because they're learning all that at the same time that they're trying to power through a rough draft at a very rapid speed. So they can't really do it at the moment with their own writing, but we're saying in the future, when you go back to start revising, this is what your sentences should look like.
That makes sense.
And then at the end of year 2, like I said, I teach them, or I do a workshop on how to find an agent, how to get a publisher. Because one of the things that, one of my pet peeves, here we go. This is bring my hot take. There's a temptation. I think there's 2 temptations that writers have. One is to be the narcissist. That's the most common one. The sort of, I'm going to write the great American novel, and if people don't understand it, that's their problem, not mine. Thinking of writing as self-reflective, right? As opposed to writing as service to others.
Yes. As the UPS man, I think is like Nate talks about. Or
Where you're like, you're
lady,
just delivering. You're
the lunch lady
serving.
is just there to serve it up.
Right. We should not be chasing the award circuit in the, like, I just want to be the king of literature. That generally that's one ditch, but that's not often the ditch that I find writers in our circles fall into. I think the other ditch is when I say, well, what are your goals for writing? And they say, well, I want to write a story, and if my kids and grandkids read it, then that's great. And that can sound really nice and sweet, but that's actually not what we're interested in doing for this program. If someone comes out of it and the only people that ever read their work ever
Was their grandmother and their
kids,
yeah.
then I feel like we failed. Because I think there's some hubris in that too, because you've set your bar so very low that there's no chance of failure for you, right? The kids are going to read it and like it because you're their mom or dad. But what I really want is for us to revive that desire to actually get your work out there and to say, like, Lord, let me stand before kings with my work. And to set the bar really high so that you have something to aim at. And, your prayer can be, it should be like, Lord, help me get an agent, help me get a publishing book deal, help me hit the New York Times bestselling list. But if it's going to turn me into an insufferable idiot, then don't let me have that. Like,
we'll wait till the next manuscript.
You can ask for both. Like, but I just think that we shouldn't be afraid to be seeking that. We're supposed to be going out and changing culture and shaping culture, and you're not going to be doing that if just your kids read it. So my hope with the program is to help the students to set their bar really high for success for themselves.
Money.
Excellent.
That was very good.